All right, so I've started the recording, and I'm going to just take a minute to introduce our speaker, Sarah Nassif. I'll read a brief introduction and then I'll pass it over to Sarah. So, Sarah is an artist, botanist, educator, and consultant whose background includes work in field botany, urban forestry, and GIS, and whose passion is connecting people to nature where they live. She designs hands-on creative experiences for environmental organizations and others that create public space for deep connection to water, trees, and nature, build community connections, and inspire curiosity and action. Sarah's socially engaged project, Weaving Water, invites the public to examine their relationship with water by awakening them to how textiles require water at every stage of development. Participants experience textile production at a pop-up working fiber studio positioned in relationship to a body of water. They dye fabric with organic indigo and local water, twist fiber into yarn, and weave their own patterns into a collective cloth on a floor loom. Weaving water creates space for conversations about how creativity and connection to nature help us care for our waterways and our communities. And then, in regards to Sarah's current work, Sarah has served as the artist in residence at MWMO since 2021, and Abby Moore has been working in outreach at MWMO for 8 years and has always embraced art as a way to tell the story of the human relationship with water. Together, Abby and Sarah started to work in 2019 when Sarah received a Minnesota State Art Board grant to create work for her first solo show to be held in 2020 at MWMO. Sarah and Abby have organized dozens of workshops that help the MWMO watershed communities learn about the organization's work while personally connecting with the river. Sarah has taken Weaving Water on the road across the watershed to connect with residents in their neighborhoods, and it's currently installed at the Legacy Condominiums lobby in the Mill District. And then this arts engaged model has workshop model has grown to include a new host of artists providing educational and creative learning experiences of many different kinds. Building on this momentum, Abby and Sarah co-founded the AWE Network, which I think many of us are familiar with now, which is a professional community of practice that brings artists and environmental professionals together quarterly for networking and learning. So I will now turn it over to Sarah to present for us and yeah, give us a little more information about her work. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thanks, Sophie, for that introduction. And if you don't know that AWE stands for Art, Water, and Ecology, just to give a shout out to that clever acronym there, as I know we all work with acronyms. So I'm going to go ahead and press the share button and get the slideshow up. It's great to be here, everybody. Thank you so much for making space for this presentation. And I want to give a shout out to Abby Moore, who is also in this Zoom and who has been my trusted partner in developing a lot of these ways of working. So here we go. Now I'm pressing share. Desktop. That, and then I'm doing slideshow. Sophie, does this look right yet?
That looks perfect.
All right, yay. And I'm going to get rid of the big gray bar that's in the way. If I can do that. How did I do that before? Hide floating meeting controls. Okay. All right. So greetings, everybody. I am here to present about the idea of the power of arts engaged outreach. I'm here partly as my own self, as an artist and a consultant, and also as the artist in residence working with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. All right. So I just want to give you a little background first on myself. I actually didn't go to art school. I hold a degree in botany that I got at the University of Washington. And I have worked in a lot of different kind of government and adjacent research type fields, doing jobs from field botanist to urban forestry, environmental education, and even some GIS, which I still really enjoy. But for the last 20 years, I have been creating projects that focus on people, plants, and place. How do these three things come together? And I've done this in a variety of fashions, including actual fashion. My first kind of iteration was screen printing botanically inspired fashion, which you can see on my website. There's a little QR code there. If you want to scan it, you can bring up my website on your phone if you want. But this segued into becoming a teaching artist with Compass, which is a organization that brings artists into schools. And so I developed a curriculum around looking at the plant world. I realized that a lot of people aren't looking even at trees. So if we can't even notice something, how are we going to begin to care about it? So I developed quite a number of programs for everybody from little kids to older adults. Around 2015, I had my first public art project that was funded by Springboard for the Arts, thankfully, as I didn't really have an artist resume yet at that time. But that was called The Other Green Line, and it was a field guide that you could pick up for free at all the shops along the new Green Line that was opening. And that would be a reimagining of train stops as if they were trailheads. What would you be doing walking around this neighborhood? And what elements of nature could you still identify that would reflect what the nature was before, what nature looked like before the development? And then over time, this has evolved into lots of other public art projects, and now Arts Engaged Outreach Consulting, trying to help different organizations bring this to their work. So today, I really just want to talk about art. First of all, I didn't call myself an artist for the first 8 years of making art. So I get the idea that art can be this kind of heavy duty word that supposedly means a lot. But today we're going to demystify what art can do in the environmental sector. And I'm going to show you some examples and talk about the work I've been doing with MWMO and how we have created actually a whole plan that is just getting implemented this year at MWMO. And I just want to recognize that not everybody here necessarily feels comfortable with art, identifies either as a creative person. Maybe you've been using it in your programming. Maybe you've just heard about it being used by other people. Maybe you have no idea where to begin. But one thing we do have in common in official capacities and or not, that all of us have outreach as a part of the work that we're doing because we're working with the public. So in doing this work, whatever it might be, our challenge is that it's really complex work. And I just want to recognize and say thank you to everybody in this Zoom for choosing to work for the environment and in the capacities you do, and especially in water serving organizations. This is hard work and you're doing it by choice. And I just want to recognize how awesome that is. So in our complex environment, we're working with internal collaboration challenges. We're working with this hugely diverse array of participants and residents. For watershed management organizations, you might be dealing with multiple member communities or volunteers and board commissioners. Everyone's coming with different levels of understanding about water systems and nature. And on top of it, everybody's pretty busy and maxed out in general. So it's a lot to bring people on board with what we're doing. And in addition, talking about the environment is really harder than ever. We have upsetting climate events taking place, like, a dam gets washed out in a major flood, things that don't seem like they've necessarily happened before and seem so big. Science is being challenged in various ways, and often people just don't even know who to trust when problems arise. And so, at the end of the day, people are really struggling to connect the dots about how we are connected to nature as people living in a city. Your average community member doesn't know what a watershed is. It's an imaginary idea that you think you know, but you couldn't probably explain. And they certainly don't know that they live in North America's largest watershed or the fourth largest watershed on Earth. They may not have much in terms of environmental education or, experience interacting with nature or water, and they may not even connect that how they live on the land impacts their local waterways. And the truth is, if we don't have these foundation connections, there's no basis for gaining the trust and support that we need to do the work that we have chosen to do. So I want to introduce a new definition of art today, and I want to offer it as something that is not a rarefied, genius moment living in a museum. Art is really just innovative technology to engage, connect, and activate people. And, pun intended here, in this picture, you can see these are Edison students with a pennant that we made in the Weaving Water Project for their Earth Day celebration last year. But, you can see that art can be, I don't know if you can see my pointer, actually, I'm sort of pointing, but, art could be something that's on the wall. It's a beautiful mural, but art can also be activity, interaction, memory making. It's really a fundamental human activity that is a universal on-ramp. Art can be responsive. So unlike a printed material or a website, you can change your programming up as you need to for different audiences. Art is social. It creates connections with your organization and with people in the community, person to person. And art can inspire people to change behavior. And really, at the end of the day, I like you to think about art not necessarily as, a thing that there's a right or wrong way to do, but that it's a whole array of building blocks that you can use to engage people from, really a broad, come one, come all, notice that we are here, to deeply engaging them about, the science of salt in the watershed. And hands-on creative experiences really help you meet people where they're at to accomplish some of these outreach goals, like building awareness and trust, getting some accessible learning moments and creating some emotional connections, ultimately helping people understand how we all affect the watershed and how we can then convert those folks that we've reached into talking about it with their neighbors and their social groups. Arts Engaged outreach really helps us do the following, which would be reaching audience who are not engaged, reaching audiences that aren't engaged yet, kind of demystifying complicated ideas by having a visual, and then encouraging personal connection and responsibility. A lot of us are working in these government or official capacities that seem like we're experts. I mean, we are, but the public doesn't necessarily feel welcome in until you have welcomed them in and made them a little bit of a part of the team. So this also allows more voices into the conversation. And you know what? I'm really a proponent of make it a party instead of a meeting. We are all working really hard just to get through life day to day. And the more that you can make something a memorable and positive experience rather than a stressful and exhausting one, I think is good for everybody. So I'm going to introduce you to the project that Sophie mentioned earlier, which I started in 2018 with and got a couple of different grants for, called Weaving Water. And you can see in the upper right window here, there's like a loom. There's sort of an array of materials that people can look at. And the main overall question I was interested in is how do we connect with water through the cloth that we wear? Often people are not thinking about how, water is serving us in so many ways that we don't necessarily notice. And cloth, of course, is something that everybody is connected to 24 hours a day. So why not let that be a reminder? What if we were making cloth together and talking about it as, a well of human creativity? So this was a project that I envisioned as a series of installations and workshops. It was going to be my very first solo show in 2020, but of course we know what happened. But the goals would be to, explore these personal relationships with water and have this working fiber studio in some kind of a location near a body of water where we were using the actual water to do some of this fiber artwork. So what's not pictured here is the dipping in the indigo vat to make the blue. So all of these fibers in the lower left, the blue has been dyed by participants in this indigo vat, and then it's been woven by participants on the loom. So weaving water was something I've been working on and was quite excited about, but with the pandemic interruption, Abby and I just continued to talk. And since the doors weren't necessarily going to be open to the gallery, you know, it just didn't seem to be the most important thing to have a show. I thought, you know, how could this weaving water just become a way to bring people back together and into connection with the river? And boy, it really was overwhelmingly a joyful moment that first October in 2021, where we said, okay, we'll be outside. We can mask, we can distance, whatever people need to feel comfortable. We're going to come together. We're going to connect with the river, and we're going to make some beautiful things. And that day just really made an impression on both me and Abby in terms of the feedback that we received from participants. So we continued these workshops every month, whether it was online or distanced or, you know, mail order, Zoom, whatever. We did a whole series of workshops, and I invited various other artists in to co-present with me over the course of that 2021-2022 year. And in the going into 2022 and 2023, these weaving water workshops that we had been holding at the MWMO, you know, it was apparent that not everybody can make it to the MWMO. What if we were to take this out on the road across the watershed? How do we meet people really physically where they are? How do we take advantage of other artists' networks in the watershed to help, you know, convey our message while supporting them in their goals as well? So putting on an indigo workshop is not an easy or common thing. And but in the case of working with Karen Goulet, who is pictured here, she had a beautiful show up all about the river and various multimedia installations, but she'd been working a little bit with indigo. And so it was just a perfect synergy that I was able, as my role as the artist in residence, to bring an indigo dye workshop to All My Relations Arts, which is right there on Franklin. And we hosted this amazing 50-person, you know, weaving water workshop party where she was able to produce all of this material you see coming off the loom that is now a part of her traveling exhibit. And the MWMO was able to, you know, become share the work that we do with 50 participants from this particular community. So that's been really a fruitful connection and continues to be part of our network of arts organizations around the watershed that I've been developing partnerships with. Sort of, you know, what are the other directions that we could take this? Well, one of the questions I ran into all the time was that people really stumble on what the idea of a watershed even is. And in 2023, the WACPA Triennial Art Festival was launched by Public Art St. Paul. WACPA means means river in Dakota language. And this is a major art festival, and it's really exciting to bring all these different artists together across a network of locations along the river to talk about our relationships with the river in so many different ways. And we just slid right into this festival like we might as well have been an art gallery, but it was, you know, a really fun opportunity to attract people that were coming to this festival and engage them in literally creating a watershed. So you can see in the bottom left there, I've cut out the Great Lakes. I provided the pattern and the operation, and then everybody collaborated to just build this watershed kind of backwards layer by layer. So we started with the dark blue, then we laid the white watershed basin over it, then the gray, let's see here, the blue in the corners, and then the gray backing at the end, and did this wet felting process to create this 5 foot by 4-foot giant felted map that's really fun to trot around with and be able to point to and show off that, yes, here we are living at the top of this thing. It's a little like living by Mount Everest and not ever talking about it. It's a really big deal that we live in the Mississippi watershed, Mississippi River watershed. So sort of segueing from that project came sort of a mini version of it in which people get to make and take their own little watershed. So this actually, it was a workshop I just did with Prior Lake a couple of weeks ago for their Citizen Advisory Council meeting and board meeting, where, here are all these amazing people showing up after a long day of work to do more free work. That's kind of hard. And in asking, only a couple people could really confidently talk about what a watershed is. So in this project, we were able to create these little individual tiles that at least got the point across that, you've got the landscape, you have some kind of a shape of a watershed basin, and then you have the surface water flowing on top, probably flowing out through some common point. And so people got really creative and created the watersheds that they imagined in their own backyards. And the cool thing was that as people were working with their hands throughout the meeting, they really got loose and talked a lot more. And I believe that they got some really great feedback in terms of the questions that they were hoping to get answered through this giant annual meeting. So, okay, so in general, the Weaving Water workshop is really just one art project. But it's got all these different legs and all of these different ways that we've been able to sort of test out what does arts engagement look like in all these different scenarios. And ultimately, we have created a plan around growing arts engaged outreach across the MWMO organization and also beyond, including you guys. So down here at number 6, the AWE network is something that I'll be sharing with you guys a little bit about. But just to give you an overview of what things are looking like at MWMO these days, our program includes workshops, which there's a lot of different artists working. Here's Kim Bosted, who has the Art and Science on the River workshop series, that she does some really cool watercolor and working with salt and talking about science and invasive species. In our lobby, if you've ever stopped into the watershed building, we have this lovely space that is such a great place to have an exhibit, and especially for artists that are less interested in trying to get into the MIA and more interested in trying to do something for the environment through direct connection. This is a really nice opportunity for us. So here is Victoria Bradford Strabicki's net making installation. She actually made this net and held some net making workshops. Partner events all around the watershed. Those could be in partnership with different organizations. It's 10:05, okay. Or festivals, whatnot, public art that, could be temporary or permanent. But you can see we're working with a lot of different artists. And then we've got internal programs just to help ourselves take advantage of arts engaged experiences to build the skill set of communicating about this complex work that we do and building connections even within our teams. And to help really the staff across all the disciplines understand that art is an engagement tool. And I'm sort of jokingly calling it a BMP, sort of the same way that we are so innovative with tree trenches and swales and everything. Like, outreach also deserves to have a light shined on it for being an innovative using an innovative approach. So not to put down brochures and websites, those are always perennial and helpful and nice grab and go items, but they're a real different thing from this. So finally, I just want to introduce you to the AWE network. Stands for Art Water Ecology. You can go to artwaterecology.org to check it out. But the idea of this is that in order for us to share this work beyond the MWMO and really start affecting the watershed on a broader basis, myself as an artist, I was seeing so many artists working in the same capacity as me in their own little niches, whatever that might be, invasive species or the history of the river or whatever the niche was that they were kind of mining in a way creatively. And then there's all these organizations that are interested in partnering with artists, but maybe don't have the contract stuff figured out, or they don't know any artists yet, or how to get started. Art overlaps with nature and people making art about nature, art in public, the communities in the public. We've got public art. There's stuff to support that. We've got our parks and nonprofits to connect people to nature. But when you bring all three together, it's like there isn't enough structure in there. And so the Art Water Ecology Network is really about giving everybody a chance to build those connections directly by coming together for quarterly meetings that are super fun. Our next one is June 23rd. So mark your calendars. It'll be at, and I've forgotten how to say the name, North Mississippi, no, Gateway Regional Park. Yes, Gateway Regional Park. So it's a place for both artists and environmental workers. So don't feel that you will be out of place no matter where you're at in the mix. And they're really fun. So I invite you guys to just keep the conversation going. If you want to talk with me directly, you can, follow me on Instagram or go to my website or email me or visit me this weekend at Art of Whirl. I'm in the Casket Arts building, number 316. And I can give this all to Sophie so that you don't have to scramble to write it down. But I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the chance to share all this work that we've been doing. This is a little shot of this recent, what I'm calling a cultural daylighting project about the Bridal Veil watershed that took place at Malcolm Yards during the Earth Week water party a couple weeks ago. So I'm open for questions and whatever I can answer. And now I stop sharing and I go back to being the person. Okay, here I am.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, we can open it up for some questions. And I know we also had asked our folks at CRWD and South Washington Watershed District to share a little blurb about their own artist in residence experiences too.
Hi, Sarah. This is Mary Sella from CAP region. I'm curious about how you all were able to work with the virtual workshops. Did you have to send like kits to people to do at home, or how did you all navigate that?
Yep. So Abby and I are strong adherents to what we call, well, not what we call, but what is called emergent strategy. There's a book everybody should read, which will really get you comfortable with the idea that not having a plan does not mean you're a bad planner. It means you are open and ready to be responsive. So as the pandemic progressed, and we didn't often know like how it would go. But in the case of the January one, it was a deep freeze and, people were kind of freaked out again. And so I created the packets to mail out to people to just stitch these little dream pillows. I have one sort of floating around here. So, and then we hosted the Zoom meeting in the Watershed building distance. It was quite an operation. And, but we had, I think, 40 or 50 people Zoom in to join this online stitching workshop, working with the idea of the Mississippi Black experience as facilitated by Amake Kubat, and then stitching these dream pillows as we sort of shared our individual personal connections with the river. So yeah, people got kits in the mail and stitched on Zoom while we experienced this program put on by Amake, which was really awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Cap region folks, would you want to take a minute and just share a little bit about your own artist in residence experience lately?
Sure, I can kick us off. For folks I haven't met, my name is Jessica, and here at Cap Region, Mary Sella and I work together. So we had an artist in residence, Christine Baumler, for about 10 years. And then there was, I don't know, a couple years span there where we were kind of getting our act together, I guess. And we recently hired Sarah Peters, who is a former executive director from Northern Lights and the Northern Spark Festival, if you're familiar with that, kind of the all-night arts party. Sarah has three core areas that we're working with her on. One is artistic consultation on projects and programs of the district, and we've kind of noted a handful of them that she'll be working with us on. And then she's doing art and water workshops, which Mary Sella will talk about in a second here. And then as the committee was selecting the artist in residence, we realized that we were selecting someone who had a ton of experience, but we also had a lot of really compelling emerging artists in our pool of applicants. And so as we talked and we're kind of closing up the meeting, one of our managers, who's an artist, was like, we really need to be doing something with emerging artists. And especially as it relates to our DEI work and our commitment to working in diverse communities and what could that look like. And so we added in a third part of Sarah's work, and that is mentoring an early career artist. As we were contemplating next steps for that and started talking internally, we came to the conclusion that Mary Sella is the perfect early career artist. So we've been trying to figure out how to weave in that role with her position here at the district and kind of what that looks like here over the next year or two. So do you want to maybe talk about the first workshop?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I am a paper maker. I think I've shared that with some of you all here. Some would consider me a bio artist because I work with seeds as well. I work with native pollinators and flowers specific to Minnesota. And I put that inside of my paper. I bind them into journals and sell those and host workshops as well. At CRWD, I'm the community engagement coordinator. So it's been a fun ride mending the world and the Venn diagram of my life. And Sarah Peters has been a really awesome mentor and guide in this process. We just hosted our first workshop on Saturday, this last Saturday, and it turned out really well. Our focus for workshops is to bring people to highlight our building, bring people inside here. And we were able to have we had a seed paper party just for a couple hours, and we had a bunch of neighbors come by. There were about 35 to 40 people who came. And this year we'll be focusing on just a few other workshops throughout the year to bring folks here. And in addition to the mentorship and co-hosting the workshops in our office, I'll be listening in on the capital improvement project meetings that Sarah Peters will be involved in, just to learn and observe and take notes. So yeah. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thanks for sharing. That's very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you, Sophie.
And maybe I'll invite you to just speak a little bit about South Washington's experience with artists in residence as well, and then we can turn it over to questions from anyone.
Yeah. So at South Washington, we did our first artist in residence program back, I think it was 2023 is when it started, with photographer Sarah Lilja. She's kind of similar to yourself, Sarah. There's a second part of her career that she started doing photography, and similarly didn't call herself an artist until well into her time doing photography. But she was really connected with nature and connected with the district. She just so happened to live within our district boundaries, which wasn't a requirement, but definitely was a fun way to incorporate that connection. But the program was really successful. We had a great time with Sarah developing the work that we wanted to develop. She focuses in on specific details. So she's really into blown up macro photos of flowers or insects, the smaller things that, bring the district together instead of not just the larger landscapes. But we had a lot of success with that, and it connected us with a different part of our district. Sometimes I hear folks, their boards are maybe uh, not maybe primed and ready to accept a different type of education outreach, like an artist in residence program. But what I can suggest to folks who are interested in doing something like that is presenting it as just another way to connect with a segment of the population in your district, or within your community that you're trying to reach. It's I think of it as kind of like your specific programming and outreach, like when you reach out to farmers for ag. It's just a way to connect with a specific population that maybe you haven't had the chance to interact with before, or just bring in new people who maybe just aren't super interested in water at a surface level, but really care about art or photography or what have you. So yeah, it was a really successful program. And so this year we got a second artist in residence, and we're pursuing the program again. We have joined forces with a artist who does photography, aerial photography and videography. Taylor Mills is her name. So we're really excited to take a aerial approach to the district and show the landscape in a way that hasn't been done before. So yeah, it's been really exciting, and we're looking forward to the next year with Taylor. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's really exciting. Thanks for sharing, Abby. Well, yeah, we can open it up for questions for Sarah or for our folks from Cap Region or for Abby. And if other people have experiences with artists in residence at their own organizations, feel free to share. Awesome. I see Jessica posted in the chat that Coon Creek Watershed District is hoping to dip our toes into arts engaged outreach this fall. So that's very exciting.
I had one question for folks that I would love ideas on. Probably like many of you, our contract is pretty complex. The insurance requirements are very high. This has been an ongoing conversation for us at the district because it really limits who we can collaborate with. And that shows up a lot in the arts related engagement. And I was just wondering, what are other folks doing to work with that? Because I'd imagine a lot of other people are experiencing the same thing. We have some ideas, but I would love to hear what y'all are doing.
I can talk about it a little bit, at least what we've done, and I don't know if this is the right way, but our insurance requirements also in just our sort of like most simple professional services contracts are very high and don't make sense for artists for sort of the amount that they're getting paid to do work with us to have to take out a policy that covers them for such and such. I don't remember what our normal language says, but it's quite large. So I have, with the guidance of our attorneys, modified the contract that I use with artists. It's still sort of the basic template of our professional services contract, but have removed some of the insurance language. The thing that that does, and that I've tried to be really clear with artists when I give them this modified contract, is it basically just puts responsibility on them to decide. So the language in our contract says something along the lines of the contractor will insure themselves, or I mean, I can't think of like actual words, but something along the lines of the contractor will assess their own need for insurance and take care of themselves, essentially. So it's kind of like putting all of the responsibility on them to decide what they need, based on what their work is worth. We know that when service providers are in our facility doing, so like facilitating a workshop or something like that, that they're covered under our organizational insurance for like incident and injury. So it's the times that they're vulnerable or like traveling to and from. Anyway, so that's the only sort of workaround that I've found so far, is to kind of remove the insurance requirement and change the language to say that the contractor will decide what they need and take care of it themselves. And they basically sign that they're going to do that. And so we leave it in their hands. And so far, folks have been willing to sort of manage that risk themselves and decide what they need. I don't know that it's perfect, but it has at least, like, that has been a hang up for a lot of, and even some of our other smaller outreach projects. It's been a hang up for folks because the insurance requirements are so big. But the attorneys that I've consulted have, they've been open to kind of working with me to help figure out, you know, like what we need as an organization to be sort of safe, covered, and how to communicate with service providers, what responsibility they're taking on as far as insurance. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I could just speak from the artist side of the equation here, having, you know, in 2014, started researching, how do I get myself insured for the activities that I'm doing as a social practice artist engaging with the public? And you know, I really wasn't even able to find any insurance for the first 5 years that could cover me. I just had to hope for the best. I mean, you know, I have a limited liability company. So that's one thing that artists can do for no money at all, is be a single member LLC instead of a sole proprietor. This is just a little filing with the state, and it gives you some protection that should somebody decide that they were poisoned by the buckthorn ink or whatever, you know, they can't take your house. That it's you know, these are things that as artists, nobody's training you on. And by the way, you cannot afford a lawyer. So you're getting a free lawyer from somebody at Springboard for the Arts or whatever. And it's incredibly complicated. And it's just one of the kinds of insurance that you have to figure out how to do as a solo working artist person. So the best situation I've had was working with Common Bond Properties, who had a very specific insurance package that they needed me to get in my name, but that they reimbursed me for. So they had done the research. They said, here's the company. It's $150. Get it, add us as an additional insured, and then we will reimburse you the $150. So, I mean, it's definitely a big deal when you have a $20,000 contract and it's $2,000 to get insurance. It's, you know, that's a burden for the artists. So I think this is something that we should keep talking about and maybe have a little working group on, as we kind of can maybe come up with a best practice here.
Sarah, you mentioned Springboard for the Arts, and I know one of the reasons that they exist is to help artists navigate these sort of things. Would you recommend that artists go talk to them? And is that how you got your ultimate guidance too? Is that a good place to start? And maybe watershed districts too?
Oh yeah, 100%. Springboard for the Arts is totally the reason I became an artist, honestly. I started out in this making and selling of goods business designer kind of concept, but when I segued into doing public art and teaching artist practices and trying to get grants and things like that. It's a whole different ball of wax. And they have a whole work of art series that's free training. All of their training's just wonderful. And they've got great people that can help. They've got free legal advisors, free healthcare advisors. Yeah, definitely send any emerging artists you're working with over to them. But that said, the way that we're working is sort of its own animal. You know, you're outside in a park doing this weird thing. So you're not at your studio, you're not, you know, and so policies are really hard to sort through and figure out. And if you're starting out, you know, $1,000 policy that might give you bare minimum is still $1,000 out of your pocket that year. And depending if you're a full-time artist or not, that may or may not even be feasible. So I'd say insurance is a major complication. I know Katie Nyberg has struggled with that as well over at MPC, where she isn't anymore. But yeah, so I think the more we talk about it with one another, maybe the better we can come up with a approach that works across the board.
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of curious out of everybody that's in here, whether the arts engaged approach is something that you're either interested in, and maybe you can put it in the chat, whether it's something, you know, on a scale of, well, I don't know what the question would be, but, you know, are you looking into trying to do this? Or do you know that there's already going to be resistance in your organization? Are you, you know, what kind of questions or hurdles are people looking at in terms of trying to bring an arts engaged experience into their organization? For the case of MWMO, they already had this arts program established quite a number of years. I mean, that's not the case for everybody, but let's see here. I'll open the chat, see if anybody's saying anything. Okay.
You know, Sarah, while people are answering that question, I would throw out too that just kind of a sort of a not really question, but kind of, would you suggest that Watershed District educators and other people who are exploring this get on the mailing list for and show up at an event just to mix it up with artists and ask some of those questions and meet some people and see what people are doing and kind of just feed that curiosity and give you more ammunition to bring back to your organization?
Yes, I think that's exactly. Thanks for making that on-ramp for me. Here's a link to the Art Water Ecology Connect page. And, you know, our next gathering is June 23rd, and I need to get the details out about that. But join this little email list. You're not going to get spammed. Trust me, I don't have enough time to get spam going. But we need to have people on the list so that you can receive the invitation to come to these quarterly meetings. So they're just every 3 months. We also have a Google group that you can join and post about opportunities or connect with artists or ask questions. So it's artists and environmental workers together. And if you look on the homepage, you'll see under events. Yep, the All Summer Gathering is already there. But I just don't have the RSVP form up yet. So
I would say though, just from having attended a few events, they are a party. It's fun to be there. Usually there's an artist presenting. So it's not going to be necessarily, unless it's planned that way, sitting down and talking through insurance or anything like that. So it's going to be on you to make connections and talk to people and mix it up. But it is a really good opportunity to be in a space where people are exploring this and really want to be working in this. And the more people from various professions interested in this come together in this space, the better the conversations are going to be and the better the connections are going to be. So you'll have fun, you'll learn something and you'll be able to put yourself out there and meet some people and make some connections.
And the model we're using is called community of practice. So this is really about the people that show up in the room, that we're kind of co-creating whatever this thing is, versus it's not like the MWMO has everything figured out and I'm, you know, waltzing in with Abby to do our tap dance and tell you all the answers. we totally don't have all the answers, but we keep stumbling forward really successfully. And really just want to share that out across as many different organizations as we can, because this has been such an effective model. And oh, thanks, Rachel.
I was just going
I've
to,
been,
oh,
no, go
sorry.
ahead.
No.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I've had the pleasure of getting to work on a lot of kind of like art and water type projects, but that have been led by the artists that are kind of like reaching out and bringing me or us in. And there's kind of like pros and cons to that. Because I can think of one of the first ones, Art Reach St. Croix had this year-long project called Navigate, and they had kind of handpicked a group of like 10 environmental professionals and 10 artists, and then brought us together for a series of 4 retreats. And it was kind of open-ended as to, what might come out of it, but also just a goal of relationship building. Um, Likewise, currently there's a group of artists in the St. Croix that are doing a climate resiliency project called Likely Stories. And, they're meeting regularly, and they're bringing in me and other people as kind of like content experts to help them. So it's been really cool because they come up with creative ideas, and it takes away a lot of that, pressure on us. Like, we don't have to figure out logistics or funding or any of that stuff. But then the flip side is that I sometimes feel like there's a lack of connection with the greater organization that I'm part of. Like there's a connection with maybe me or the other person that's involved, and not necessarily an awareness or connection with my boss, my board, everybody else. Even though I'm telling them about it, they don't necessarily have that sense of ownership. So I'm just curious if anybody else has been doing those kinds of things.
I'll just offer, even though I'm not one of the organizations, I can say that as an artist, and not coming up through the art channels and not having some of the expectations around being the chosen one for the big award when 100 people applied and everything else, that to me is a really difficult model to work in as a professional. And so as I've sort of forged this way of working with Abby, where I'm a contractor, much the way you're going to hire a website designer, you're going to hire a landscape architect, you're going to get a consultant to tell you about marketing or whatever it is, artists are consultants too. And when you take the project into your hands and have it as a contract that's like, look, here's a $10,000 project, $20,000 project, $5,000 project, where you're collaborating with the artist around some of that strategic thinking, that creates a much more sustainable opportunity for the artist. And it also allows you to have a little bit more control in the operation. When you're an artist and you've gotten the grant for $10,000 from the State Arts Board, and you got to get that thing spent in X amount of time and do this and do that and figure it all out as you go, also be creative and make the art. It's kind of, just imagine it's just going to be what it is in a way. And that can be wonderful, but it's not necessarily targeted. And I think that's where I'm really looking to kind of do a 2.0 in the how do arts work in this sector, the environmental sector, because it is so critical. And everyone here is passionate about the work that we're doing. And yet, why are we using the same tools that we've always used, especially as the landscape has changed? You got to be an expert on social media, but now nobody looks at social media or whatever the thing is. At the end of the day, you're dealing with a geographic entity. You've got people in it. You've got social systems in it that already exist. How can you tap into those? And who are the partners that can help you network within those using art and creativity rather than waiting for like the project to fall out of the sky, which is, sort of the system that we're left with at the moment, which is, who's got an art project? But does that make sense? I'm not sure.
I have a question for the group. I was looking at one of Rachel's comments about evidence of efficacy of this kind of programming, and I'm curious about like what would, for any outreach program that you do at your organization, this is to everybody, what would demonstrate efficacy? Like what would be that measure that you could then take to your leadership or board or whoever would need to approve it and say, look, this is an effective program. It is doing whatever.
I think I can speak. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure.
Hey, Rachel.
You go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, kind of from the county side, I feel like if you can explain that you're engaging different groups of people, that's super helpful, and new groups of people that you're not getting through different education and outreach efforts that you're already doing. Yeah. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
Yeah, I think something that has like shifted things a little bit at the county, like we had to evangelize a lot of technical folks that diversifying our outreach tools was a worthwhile endeavor and could maybe even expand our impact beyond our existing tools. And I think for us, in the absence of a lot of like published case studies from local community groups, having a lot of conversations with like Abby, MWMO, and Capital Region and other folks to learn anecdotally what was most beneficial was super helpful in convincing our leadership structure that this was a worthwhile endeavor to pursue. And I think the other aspect that was helpful, because there's such an immeasurable quality of the arts and what they bring to spaces, but it's such a felt sense of how they function. Using social media as a way of, litmus test to see how our engagement is shifted when we're utilizing art was really helpful at convincing more data-driven folks that this was useful. But I think long-term, it would be so awesome to have something akin to Capital Region's field guide to working with artists, but having maybe more examples from the community of undertakings that have been really successful or that have garnered interest from the press or have drawn in, like Grace mentioned, new communities into the work. I think would be really compelling for organizations that are more hesitant but art curious, and any evidence or any additional structural aspects of how to fund it or how to navigate supporting an artist in residence, I think is super helpful, kind of like the field guide.
I'll just mention that that's part of the what the Odd Network hopes to do is provide, there's a connection for a stories tab there, and to start plowing in case studies from both artist perspective and organization perspectives into kind of a place that you could say, hey, I heard they're doing this cool thing, let me show you, and then go to the website and point at a project where you've got some visuals, because often one of the things that's so hard is you're dealing with people's idea of art. And if they haven't experienced this, they don't have a clue what you're talking about. It's not unlike, what is a watershed? I think I know, but I don't know, and I'd be curious what other tools would be helpful to have through the Awe Network.
I'm just going to speak. We haven't run this for a bit now, and it's tangential to this. I'm just kind of thinking about connections. But through our Minnesota Water Steward program, we've run an Art for Water component where people do actually sort of get that science foundation and also community engagement, the science of community engagement, difficult conversations, network building, that kind of thing. It's not specifically for artists. That's for the action step of an artist going into their practice. That's where he kind of segued into support with Springboard for the Arts and things like that. And that was prior to AWE existing. But I was almost gonna, and I may still post, we just got out of the blue an email connection from Matthew Hiram, who Rachel actually was an Art for Water our water steward, sponsored by Hennepin County, who has been speaking fairly profusely and positively to the change in his practice that came from learning about the water science and finding a way. He wanted to do something for the environment, something specifically in that way, but didn't know quite how to blend his practice with that, and got a lot of inspiration and also confidence in feeling like he could delve into this more going through that curriculum. So just looking for ways to connect that. I mean, if you're looking for some solid basis there and for some other things, that there's a way we can adapt and come together and support each other. That would be really great.
Well, yeah, thank you all so much for this awesome discussion. It sounds like there are a lot of resources available that can be shared, and it sounds like we should all definitely attend the next meeting. I'm very excited about it.
I'm going to interject that I'm up in central Minnesota now, and I know that the Environmental Initiative has done some work in Little Falls. I don't know if anybody's aware of it or if they're part of this group, but they have some experience doing that too. And I just stumbled upon it when I was walking down by the Great River Arts gallery and saw that. And I have some real hands-on stuff that they've been doing there with some indigenous artists as well. So they might be somebody to be invited in. And that whole piece about insurance is really interesting. So we've been partnering with Jessica on some research projects and looking at some of this art, more engagement, bringing people in. And it's very interesting to see just to be able to quantify it and be able to say what has that impact been and what have the differences been. So trying to look at ways to try to give that some more credibility. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. We have a couple minutes if anyone has final questions or comments for Sarah or anyone else before we transition to just having a little bit of time to meet in our subcommittee groups at the end of our meeting. I see Alex shared a resource in the chat. You can take a look. Any other final questions or comments?
I would like to add, I think something that I've been seeing and exploring as I've been in this early career artist mentee role, is I've had to personally reconcile the bubbles that I've created in my mind of the water science-based education and then the artist, like, practice, and that these things are also can live side by side. And I think as I've been doing that and having conversations here at the district with the administrator, Anna Illyria, who's been very supportive, and a few members of our board, we're lucky at CRWD to have a really supportive team and a really supportive staff. And I think it takes a team to really bring in all of the science-based information and also be engaged in the art. And something that I found really fun and really, really helpful for Sarah Peters and I's initiation of being in this art era of CRWD is one of our first experiences. We went into a storm tunnel and went with one of the facility management folks at the district, and we kind of got the inside scoop. And I noticed that we were asking very different questions to our water scientists, and have been, because we come in with an artist perspective, and our staff and our board are able to see that and understand that is a beautiful approach to uplifting our sciences. And I also forgot to mention, we collaborated with one of the administrative staff here at the district, Rachel Kurvicki, who designed the posters and all of the visuals for our last workshop. And so really uplifting our own staff, who many of them are artists as well, and sort of beginning the internal reconciling that these worlds are not too far off from each other. Oh, thank you for sending that photo. Yes.
I was going to say one more thing, and that is, as they're launching these workshops, one of the things they're doing is thinking about, all right, what are some creative ways we can evaluate what we accomplished as people have this experience? So, I think it needs to be done in a fun way, but at least that gives you some anecdotal evidence of like, all right, people came in and this is something they took away that you agree ahead of time is a meaningful measure of success. So
yeah.
So anyways, trying to work through that and make sure we're being intentional about that for the arts related engagement too.
Yeah. We're trying to stay away from online surveys for our participants. If you all have ever been to an art shanty, they had this really fun voting activity where it was a bunch of survey questions, but they had chips, and you could put the chip inside of a tube and you can see it travel to where it is. And Sarah and I have talked about wanting to do that for uplifting our building engagement workshops.
I'll throw out for evaluations. I think about the film festival as well, where nobody ever even has a pencil and you just rip the side. So we've used that format in workshops before, where we have sort of a series of questions. We just want to know, how did you change? What did you come in with and what did you exit with? How were you changed by coming to this workshop? And those have been fed into a big spreadsheet that we're using. It's also a nice way to count how many people.
Those are great ideas. And I want to just call out, I was really struck by one of the comments, Sarah, that you made in your presentation about the value of art and how art changes people. And when you're thinking, how participating in an art endeavor innately changes somebody. And it kind of relates very strongly to one of the main tenets I hold to, is that once you take an action, you see yourself as an actor. and I feel like once you participate in one of these events that y'all are describing, and when it's linked, that's connected to a water awareness or an environmental awareness or a value awareness, that you are changed. And so, capturing that in the moment with a survey question or dropping a chit or whatever you do, tearing something is something, but we also just need to share that vision with our leadership, that the innate changes in people that come from these experiences are valuable, and sometimes they aren't a direct return on investment mark that we can mark, but that there's a ripple effect and a long-lasting effect that continues on beyond the events that happen.
Thanks, Chris. Well, thank you all so much for your questions and comments. I'll make sure to save the chat because I know there's a lot of resources being shared. And I can also follow up with some of those contact information that Sarah was sharing earlier too, so everyone has those available. Yeah, so we will transition to having a little time to meet in our subcommittees. And if you're new to this group, we have 4 kind of subcommittee interest groups that have been starting to meet regularly at every other Watershed Partners meeting, and some of them meet outside of these meetings as well. But we have our chloride engagement group. We have our CARE committee, which is culturally aware and relevant engagement committee. our K-12 resources committee, and then our digital resources library subcommittee. And so we have breakout rooms created. If you haven't joined one before, you can feel free to just hop in and listen and be curious. But we'll open those up. I'm just gonna stop the recording.